Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to make the case that we should invest $10 billion in the prevention and defeat of COVID-19 in the foreign assistance portion of this budget resolution. For so long as COVID-19 is anywhere, it can spread everywhere, directly threatening our national security, our economy, and the health and safety of the American people. COVID-19 has devastated the world. To date, there have been nearly 103 million confirmed cases worldwide. More than 2 million people have died, including over 450,000 in the United States. The lockdowns necessitated by the pandemic have triggered the worst recession since the Great Depression. We must join with our partners and allies around the globe to end the scourge once and for all. Now, with so many Americans shattered by the death, disruption, and economic devastation unleashed by coronavirus, I am sure more than a few would question why we should bother spending any resources in the global fight against COVID-19, let alone $10 billion. The simple answer is COVID-19 knows no borders. The pandemic didn't start here, but it came here. The world is in a race against COVID-19, and we cannot lose. For the longer we allow this virus to spread, the more it will mutate into new strains. And the more that it mutates into new strains, the greater the threat to the efficacy of our vaccines and our ability to rebuild our economy and restore our way of life. This $10 billion investment will ramp up American efforts to fight COVID-19 and stop new variants before they reach our shores and cost more American lives. It will fund humanitarian assistance to respond to the suffering inflicted by COVID-19 and channel resources to international organizations charged with and are responding to these challenges and preventing further spread. And it will support the global race to develop new vaccines. As Dr. Anthony Fauci publicly stated last month, we have to start work now preparing additional vaccines to deal with new and virulent strains of COVID-19. This will require investment both at home and abroad. In addition to our own efforts, we must invest in international research and development and support technology transfers so that vaccines capable of protecting us from future variants are produced and made available quickly around the world. The package also includes funding for global health programs that strengthen health systems in developing countries. As we've learned firsthand, COVID-19 can overwhelm even the most robust of healthcare systems. For countries with poorer public health infrastructure, the challenge is exponentially harder. And the longer we allow COVID-19 to ravage health systems around the globe, the longer it will remain a threat to the United States. The resolution will also help us protect 2 decades worth of investments to combat the spread of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria through the Global Fund. Specifically, the resolution ensures that life-saving treatments for those 3 deadly diseases continues. It also provides resources to support the Global Fund's newly developed COVID-19 response mechanism, allowing countries to better prevent, care for, and treat this disease. Mr. President, it's hard to recapture the scale of the suffering unleashed by this pandemic, but here's what we know. The number of people facing famine-like conditions around the world has doubled. Child malnutrition and death rates are on the rise. Through this resolution, we will be able to address the pandemic's toll on the most vulnerable, including children and refugees, by funding organizations such as the World Food Program and UNICEF. It will also enable us to help confront dramatically increased rates of violence against women and girls, what the United Nations has called the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence. And it will provide urgently needed funding for the World Health Organization, which the Biden administration rejoined on the president's first day in office. We cannot forfeit our seat at the table to other countries who do not share our values or our interests. We must engage and we must lead. Finally, the resolution will support ongoing State Department and USAID operations that protect Americans overseas and advance our diplomatic and economic interests around the globe. We must begin to undo the damage to the State Department and USAID wrought by the Trump administration and ensure that both agencies have the resources to deal with the effects of COVID-19, including the impacts on our Foreign Service officers and their families, embassy operations, and lost revenue due to disruption of services, even as we look to replenish and revive these critical instruments for our national security. So, Mr. President, I'll end where I begin. We cannot hermetically seal ourselves and believe that we can avoid any consequences from any place across the globe. Disease, including this one, knows no boundaries, knows no borders. Unless and until COVID-19 is stamped out globally, American lives and livelihoods remain at risk. Simply put, our international efforts to stop the spread of COVID-19 abroad are directly linked to our national and economic security at home. So I urge all of my colleagues to support continued relief, recovery, and prevention efforts by voting in support of the budget resolution. And I yield the floor to my distinguished colleague, fellow senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Card.
Mr. President.